I never thought my own mother would try to forge my signature to steal a house, but here we are. This story started 3 years ago when my grandfather passed away. Everyone thought he was a broke, retired carpenter, but it turns out he had been buying land in an area that eventually became a tech hub. He left everything to me, his only grandson who actually visited him, and bypassed his 3 greedy children. The total value of the estate? Over $4 million. And that's when the nightmare began. The day after the funeral, my mother and my 2 uncles were already in my living room. They didn't ask how I was feeling. My Uncle Bob literally handed me a contract and said, "We know Dad was confused when he wrote that will. We've already talked to a lawyer and you're going to sign 75% over to us or we will make your life a living hell." I told them to leave my house. My mother looked me in the eye and said, "You're dead to us until that money is ours."
2 weeks later, I got a call from my bank. Someone had tried to access my grandfather's accounts using a power of attorney document. When the bank sent me a copy, I felt sick. It was my signature, perfectly forged. My mother had used my old school papers to practice my handwriting. I didn't call her. I called a private investigator and the best estate lawyer in the city. My investigator found out that my uncles weren't just greedy, they were desperate. Uncle Bob had a gambling debt of $200,000 to some very bad people. My other uncle had mortgaged his house 3 times. They weren't fighting for family fairness, they were fighting for survival. They started showing up at my job, telling my boss I was a thief. I was almost fired. It was time to stop playing nice. I decided to set a trap.
I leaked fake information that I was selling the land and moving the money offshore. The reaction was instant. They filed an emergency injunction to freeze the estate, claiming I had coerced my grandfather. We went to court. My mother walked in looking smug. Her lawyer started painting me as a manipulative monster. Then it was our turn. My lawyer played the videos. My grandfather was a meticulous man. Every time he updated his will, he did it on camera with a doctor present to certify his sanity. The courtroom went silent as my grandfather's voice filled the room. He named them one by one, saying, "To Bob, who only cares about the horses, and to my daughter who hasn't visited me in 3 years, you get exactly what you gave me, nothing." The judge referred the case to the district attorney for fraud and attempted grand theft.
That night, things turned dangerous. I watched my security camera feed and saw my uncle standing in my kitchen with a gallon of gasoline and a lighter. He wanted to burn it all down. But the police swarmed the house and caught him before he could strike the flame. The fallout was massive. Uncle Bob disappeared to escape his debts. My other uncle is serving his sentence for attempted arson. My mother received a heavy suspended sentence for identity theft and had to sell her house to pay my legal fees. She now lives in a tiny apartment, the kind she tried to force me into. I used the money to start a foundation for elderly people who are neglected by their families. My family thought they were fighting for an inheritance, but they inherited exactly what they deserved, the consequences of their own greed.
Story number 2, the wedding sabotage. My best friend Sarah was getting married. I was the maid of honor. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sarah sent me a bill for $5,000. It wasn't for the dress or the bachelorette party. It was for her dream venue that she couldn't afford. She told me that since I have a good job, it was my honor to pay for it. When I refused, she didn't just get mad. She told the entire bridal party that I was trying to ruin her wedding out of jealousy. She then demanded that I cover my full-sleeve tattoos with heavy makeup because they didn't fit her aesthetic. I've had these tattoos for 10 years and she knew that. I realized Sarah wasn't my friend anymore. I was just a prop for her Instagram photos. So I decided to step down, but I didn't just quit. I had already paid for the catering as a gift. Instead of canceling it and getting a refund, I called the catering company and told them to change the menu.
Sarah wanted a high-end lobster and steak dinner. I changed it to a budget children's party theme: chicken nuggets, cold fries, and juice boxes. On the day of the wedding, I was sitting on my balcony with a glass of wine, blocking her calls. Later, I saw the photos on social media. The guests were eating nuggets on expensive china plates. Sarah was crying in her white dress next to a pile of cold fries. She tried to sue me, but since the contract was in my name and I had paid for it, there was nothing she could do. Greed looks ugly in a wedding dress.
Story 3. The Fence War. I bought my first house 2 years ago. It had a beautiful old wooden fence. My neighbor, let's call him Gary, decided he didn't like the color. Without asking me, Gary waited until I was on a business trip and tore down the entire fence on our shared property line. When I got back and saw my backyard wide open, I was livid. Gary just smirked and said, "It was an eyesore. You're welcome. I'm putting up a plastic one next week. Just pay me half." I didn't pay him. Instead, I got a professional land survey. It turns out Gary had been encroaching on my land by 3 feet for years. His entire paved driveway and half of his expensive shed were actually on my property. My lawyer sent him a notice. He had 48 hours to remove his property from my land. Gary laughed and ignored it, so I hired a construction crew. Since it was my land, I had the shed moved and a new heavy-duty industrial steel fence built exactly on the property line. Gary's driveway was now blocked by a steel wall, and he couldn't even get his car out of his garage. He called the police, but they looked at the survey and told him there was nothing they could do. He had to pay $30,000 to repave his driveway and move his shed, all because he didn't like the color of my old fence.
Story 4. The most expensive dinner I never paid for. I met a girl on a dating app. She insisted on going to the fanciest steakhouse in the city. When we got there, she didn't just order a steak. She ordered the most expensive wine, 2 appetizers, and even ordered a second steak to go for her dog. She spent the whole time on her phone, barely looking at me. When the bill came, it was over $600. She pushed it toward me and said, "I forgot my purse, but you look like you can handle it." I knew she was lying because I saw her purse in her lap earlier. I told her I needed to go to the bathroom. I walked to the manager, explained that she was trying to scam me, paid for exactly what I ate, which was just a salad and a water, and walked out the back door. I waited in my car across the street. 20 minutes later, I saw her being escorted out by security. She was screaming and crying. She blocked me instantly, but it was the best $60 I ever spent to see her face when the waiter realized I was gone.
Story 5. My boss wanted me to follow the rules, so I did. I worked in IT for a company that had very loose hours until a new manager arrived. He was a micromanager from hell. He implemented a rule that if you were even 1 minute late, you lost your bonus for the month. He also said, from now on, no one does anything that isn't explicitly written in their job description. 2 weeks later, the main server crashed at 5:01 p.m. Usually, I would stay late and fix it in 20 minutes, but my shift ended at 5 p.m., and emergency repairs were not in my basic job description according to his new manual. I stood up, packed my bag, and walked past his office. He was panicking, shouting that the company was losing thousands of dollars every minute. I told him, "Sorry, I don't want to break the rules and stay late. I'll see you at 9 a.m. sharp." The company lost over $100,000 that night because they had to hire an outside emergency firm. The manager was fired the next week, and the new one immediately scrapped all the stupid rules. I got my bonus back. Story 6. The Parking Karen.
I work in a busy downtown area where parking is a nightmare. I pay $100 a month for a reserved spot in a private lot. For 3 days straight, a massive SUV was parked in my spot. I left polite notes. Nothing changed. On the 4th day, I saw the driver, a woman in a fancy suit. I told her she was in my reserved spot. She laughed and said, "I'm just here for a spin class. It's only an hour. Get over it." I didn't get over it. I called the towing company listed on the sign, but I did one better. My friend owns a construction company, and he lent me 4 heavy-duty wheel dollies. We jacked up her SUV and moved it to the very back of the lot, in a tiny corner blocked by a dumpster that was scheduled to be picked up in 3 days. Then I parked my car in my spot. When she came out and couldn't find her car, she went insane. She thought it was stolen. When she finally found it behind the dumpster, she realized she couldn't drive it out. She had to wait 72 hours for the garbage truck to move the dumpster, and the lot owner charged her 3 days of unauthorized storage fees. She never touched my spot again.
Story 7. He stole my credit. I stole his job. I worked for 6 months on a massive marketing presentation. My colleague, Mark, offered to help me format the slides. Behind my back, he changed the author name to just his and presented it to the CEO while I was out sick. Mark got a promotion and a $10,000 raise for my work. I didn't scream. I didn't complain. I knew Mark was lazy. I started leaving mistakes in the data I sent him for his new high-level reports. I made sure the mistakes were subtle, but catastrophic if anyone actually checked the math. I also embedded a digital watermark in the metadata of all my files that clearly showed the original creation date and my ID. 3 months later, the CEO called a surprise meeting. The company had lost a major client because of a math error in Mark's latest report. Mark tried to blame me. I simply opened my laptop, showed the CEO the metadata from the original stolen presentation, and then showed the trail of bad data Mark had blindly copied because he didn't actually know how to do the job. Mark was escorted out that afternoon. I got his office, his raise, and a personal apology from the CEO.